What do we do for people who are thinking about suicide? This is a question that I asked my professor in a graduate school psychology course. I was 23, bright-eyed, eager to learn, but also terrified at the idea of having to sit across the room from someone in the future who was thinking of taking their life. I had seen the client-counselor interaction play out on way too many movies, TV shows, but I never really saw a positive outcome. My professor looked at me, puzzled, and asked me to repeat the question. So I did, also puzzled, because I figured that question couldn't get any clearer. What do we do for people who are thinking about suicide? His response made me sink into my seat. If people are going to kill themselves, they're going to kill themselves. And he continued to lecture. I thought to myself, how many other professionals in the field share in this sentiment? And upon graduation and securing my very first job, I realized that there were many professionals who held on to this belief. But not all. Its driving force, fear. That fear is most likely due to feeling unprepared. Researchers and studies have shown us that 25% of social workers in the field reported having any formalized training in suicide prevention. Yet 85% of the same social workers reported working with clients who were thinking about suicide regularly. What if they came across similar professors that I had and similar professionals in the field? And how does that impact their ability to care for those in crisis? With the current rates that we have in suicide and the 2015 suicide deaths as being over 44,000 in the US, and with our youths as suicide being the second leading cause of death, can we really afford to still maintain this belief that we can't intervene and save a life? Absolutely not. We simply need a shift in the ways that we think about suicide prevention into one of continuous support. Our current suicide prevention methods are good, and they're more following along with an immediate response, emergency, kind of similar to CPR. We recognize the risk factors for suicide, such as access to lethal means or a previous suicide attempt. We recognize warning signs, such as making statements to end their life or drastic changes in behaviors or mood. And then, when we recognize those signs, we call for help. Now, that might be a mental health counselor, it could be the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, or, in more serious cases, the police, to implement what's called a Baker Act. Now, a Baker Act is up to an initial 72-hour hold in a crisis stabilization unit or a hospital when someone is deemed to be at risk of hurting themselves or someone else. 72 hours. How many of us have been in serious crisis situations that magically resolve themselves in 72 hours? Not many. Yet we still maintain this belief that after we refer someone to help, that their problems just disappear. Unfortunately, that's not the case. In the medical field, anyone who has a major surgery or major medical appointment is followed up with by someone at the hospital to ensure that they understand their treatment, their medication, and they know and understand the recovery process. When our pets get sick and we have to take them to the vet, Someone from the vet's office is following up to ensure that little Chauncey is still chugging along. Yet, when someone leaves our Baker-acting facilities, our hospitals, crisis stabilization units, no one is following up. When I worked on the crisis hotline, we were required to follow up with people within 24 hours to ensure that they were okay. I remember vividly the number of people on the other end of that phone that would say, "You still remember me?" And I would hear a smile creep through as I said, "Of course I do." When people leave our Baker-acting facilities, they're given a referral slip to a counselor, yes. But then they go home and they return to the same circumstances that were occurring prior to them going into the hospital. So it's no surprise that one study shows us that people leaving our hospital systems had a high frequency of suicide within 2 weeks post-discharge, with the highest number occurring just 1 day after they leave the hospital. Following up can help with this. There is power in knowing that someone still cares about you long after your treatment. And researchers get this, and they have been doing countless studies on following up with people leaving the hospital. One study in particular divided their patients into 2 groups. One group was given a simple follow-up card in the mail that said, "We're thinking of you. Give us a call if you need us. We're here." The other half did not receive anything in the mail. Of the half that received that simple follow-up card, they saw a significant reduction in the severity of suicidality based on their rating scale. They also saw a significant reduction in readmissions to the hospital. And researchers have taken this a step forward and a step further through national grants and have implemented what's called care coordination. And they've been able to do that right here in Central Florida, in Lake County, where they have embedded what's called care coordinators into behavioral health organizations. This care coordinator does follow-up, yes, but they go above and beyond a simple phone call or a card in the mail. They help that client navigate those tricky resources in the community. They help them create what's called a safety plan. And a safety plan is a document that the client can create along with that counselor of all of the people, hobbies, interests that they have, and other options than attempting suicide. But above all else, this care coordinator serves as an additional layer of support for someone who desperately deserves to have someone in their corner. Having a support system and a sense of purpose in life is a protective factor for suicide, meaning that it decreases the risk. If we were all to make a list of the reasons why we're here today, the reasons why we're alive, we might have our family, our friends, our hobbies, our careers on that list, all of the components that make up our sense of purpose. But for those who are thinking about suicide, a similar list would be very daunting for them, as they often believe that nobody cares about them and they don't have a purpose here. The last thing that we want is for them to leave our care, our hospitals, our crisis stabilization units, still feeling this way and still feeling so alone. I've used the term "we" a lot today because we don't need to be in mental health or in medical care to follow up with someone, to call them, to invite them out to lunch, to show them that we care and check in on their treatment. So let's change our conversation from "we can't save everyone" to "let me do the best that I can with the people who are in my life that I know are struggling and I know need my support and my help." Care coordination is the way to do this. There are a lot of wonderful grants out there throughout the country that are doing this right now, but we can also play our part as well. Follow up, show that you care, save lives. Thank you.